Each one of us has a story. Our journey has and is continuously impacting us. By listening to my guests share how they are discovering their best self, you will discover the best part of you. And thank you for tuning in to Discover Your Best podcast. We have Mr. Shawn Taylor with us today, who's going to talk to us about a plethora of things. He's going to tell us where he's from and also what his background is and some of the firsts that he's done in his family and in his community. So, Mr. Shawn Taylor, tell us who you are and where you're from.
Good day, everybody. I'm excited to be here today and share whatever it is that I can share, pearls of wisdom, experience. As was already said, my name's Shawn Taylor. I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, South Side, in a housing project called Augill Gardens. I'm the youngest of 4 kids, single mom, welfare, very crime-infested community, although there were a lot of good things as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Chicago Vocational High School, where I played football, 3-year varsity player, captain my senior year. Was a pretty good athlete, recruited quite a bit, and wound up going to Purdue University on academics as opposed to athletics. Chose to major in accounting. Graduated in 4 years in the top 10% of my class, and packed up everything, my little U-Haul, and drove to Dallas to start work at the time, the largest accounting firm in the world, Arthur Andersen.
So how did you get to Arthur Andersen?
I was recruited off campus when my senior year, because of my grades and my summer internships, I was pretty heavily recruited. I almost felt like football, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I had 11 job offers coming out of college. I want to say 4 or 5 of the Big 8 accounting firms. You know, there are only 4 now. And then several industrial private companies, IBM, General Electric, Ingersoll Rand, McDonald's. In fact, I was just playing golf with the former CEO, a good friend of mine, Don Thompson, who also went to Purdue, him and his wife Liz, and we were talking about that, and the first thing came out of his mouth is, we were pretty cheap back then, and that's exactly why I didn't take the job. There was a big pay difference between going to work for them and the offer that I had on the table in Dallas. So I was recruited, came down in January of my senior year. It was a 30 below wind chill in West Lafayette, Indiana. We had 10-foot snow drifts. And when I landed in Dallas that Thursday night, it was a light drizzle and a balmy 67 degrees.
Yeah, I can understand that.
And I remember thinking to myself, that's a 100-degree temperature swing. I might like it here. So basically, when I got back to campus with my offer, it was a simple question to answer, and the question was, well, my answer was, why not? Why not try somewhere new?
Right.
I only grew up in Chicago, knew Chicago, and I figured if I didn't like it, I could always move back.
Right. And so you say that you got recruited, and, a lot of times, especially, I talk to people who are my age or a little bit younger, and they're like, I can't find a job, or, I feel like people don't understand how that process goes, or it sounds like you had a lot of opportunities because you were the top of your class, but for people who are looking for those type of opportunities, how did you get that opportunity?
Well, that was the Stone Age. That was before the internet. That was before email and fax, and so in some cases I had to write a letter to a company, letting them know and sending my resume and letting them know that I was interested in interviewing with them. In other cases, which I think is still the case today, you would go to the placement office and sign up, and then they would select who they wanted to interview. Probably do all that online now on most college campuses. And in other cases, I had professors who companies would ask, who are some of their better students, and my name, frequently popped up. And honestly, it helped that, I'm a person of color, because a lot of companies were looking, especially in the accounting industry, they were looking for, as they would say, qualified, minority candidates.
Yeah.
So I kind of, fit that slot. So I would say today it's probably more difficult today because the competition is so fierce. Um, First and foremost, if you're a college student, your number one job is to be a college student. Not necessarily to pledge, not necessarily to party all the time or hang out at the co-rec or sleep. Your number one job is to go to class, study hard, get good grades. Companies aren't looking for, average students anymore.
Right.
So if you're a C average student, you're going to have a really difficult time being able to place with a quality company and earn compensation that can help you get a good start professionally from an income standpoint. So, I've two grown kids who have graduated from college, and they were both student athletes. And my rule in our household was if you get one C in class, you're off the team. Because there's no room in this household for you to be average, because that's what a C is, you're average.
Yeah.
And even today, a low B average can still be a bit of a hurdle for you to get through all the screens of getting to the interview process. Once you get through the interview process, you need to do your homework. You need to read up on the company. You need to understand what they do, their products, their culture, and the position that you're interviewing for. You need to understand a little bit what will be expected of you. And then you have to, number three, be a good salesperson. You have to sell yourself. And I used to always tell people, think of yourself as a company. Your brain is a supercomputer. Your body is a physical plant, and now you have to sell yourself to the person sitting on the other side of the table, or in today's day, on the other side of a computer screen or on the other side of a telephone, because there's a lot more of that type of interviewing, starting out initially before they invite you into the office to actually get to know you.
Right. So do you correlate tenacity or even like success with being a student athlete?
Being an athlete definitely helped and contributed significantly to my success, specifically the discipline, the self-denial, deferred gratification. So when I stopped playing football in college, I had all this time on my hand, which I didn't have in high school. Plus the fact that I had to ride 3 buses to and from high school every day. So I did my homework on the bus a lot of times, or I get into school early and try to finish it up in the cafeteria. When I wound up having all this free time in college, the challenge was to be focused and disciplined enough to use that time productively. For me, I get distracted easy. I'm not ADH or whatever. I just get distracted easy, so I need quiet. So I would often go to the one of the engineer libraries, and not only go to the library.
It's very quiet in the engineer library.
It's very quiet, but I would also go below ground level. So I go to the mezzanine or the basement. And the reason being there are no windows. And so I would lose track of time. So if I go to the library and it's daylight, and then all of a sudden I look up and it's dark, like, oh, well, I'm ready to go. I didn't worry about that. And so that became sort of my go-to study place. And I would pretty much plan out the days that I would spend considerable time in the library reading, doing my homework, studying and preparing for my exams. I wouldn't do it in the dorm because there's just too many things that could get my attention and get me off track. Now, some people can do that. I just wasn't one of those people. And I would say, with that in mind, you need to find out your weaknesses. And rather than feel sorry for yourself, recognize what you can and can't do, and then find a way to overcome that. And so going to the library was
I like that, because what I find a lot of times, people who don't, have that tenacity or don't that push in them, they do have this, woe is me feeling, instead of learning who they are and how they best work or get things done. I think I could relate to that. I had to leave my dorm, and I had 3 roommates, so I couldn't be in my dorm room, and I would be in the library. That was kind of like my safe place where I knew I could get my things done. So yeah, I definitely understand that.
So I would say the other thing, it's sort of been my lifelong motto from high school playing football was I had an incident in practice, which I won't go into. It wasn't anything bad, but
Yeah.
I didn't execute the assignment that I was given, and the coach came up to me and asked me what happened. He was a bit upset, and to this day I don't remember what I said to him. In my explanation, but what he said to me changed my life, the trajectory. He said excuses are for losers, and so I've lived my life. I was 15 at the time. I've lived my life since I was 15, and I just turned 60 in December. By that saying that excuses are for losers. And in my mind, that meant if you make up excuses because you didn't deliver or you didn't fulfill your commitment, you lose out. And I think all too often people have advanced rationalization. They won't say excuses, but advanced rationalization to explain away why they have not succeeded in life towards their goals. And so me, I own it. If I screw up, if I drop the ball, I own it. That's the end of the discussion, and I move on.
Okay. So you're not really hard on yourself, or
I'm
you
extremely
are?
hard
You're
on
very
myself.
okay.
I'm brutally honest with myself. I mean, I don't self-deprecate, but I don't let myself off the hook.
Right.
And I find reward systems or penalty box things that if I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, I remove certain incentives out of even at this point in my life, out of my day-to-day life. So.
Oh, well, give us an example.
So back then, I was into racquetball, and of course I like going out to parties. But if I was behind on my studies, which usually was because I procrastinated. Or I was hanging out with my girlfriend or something, I wouldn't go to a party, or I wouldn't go play racquetball, or I may not watch a show that I, normally like to watch. So a lot of times on Sundays, I like watching football. I wouldn't watch football on Sundays. I go to the library all day, literally after lunch, from 1 o'clock, and I may not get back to the dorm till 9 o'clock at night. And so in that case, I say, these guys are making their money, they're doing well. Why am I going to watch them make money when I'm not making money? And the only way that I ultimately could make money was through my grades and ultimately, starting my career.
Right.
Today, I might not go play golf. Or I may not go to, I like movies. I may not go to the movies. Or I may pass up on a social event that's important to me. Or I may get up like this morning. I got up at 4:30 and I was in the office by 6 o'clock. So, because I didn't finish up something yesterday.
Right. So, do you look at yourself as successful?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Considering that I can remember not even thinking about college. When I started high school, it was, 4 years. However many years of English, math, and science, and I'm going to get a job, an apartment outside of my neighborhood, and a car, and I'm good to go.
Okay.
I had a decent career working in public accounting. I left that world in '96 and moved to Houston to become the largest African-American Taco Bell franchisee, which ultimately I built that company to 33 restaurants here in the Houston market. My goal has always been to be financially independent, and I always define that as I work because I want to, not because I have to. And so in June of 2007, I sold my company and retired at 46.
Yeah.
And honestly, I really didn't have to ever work again in my life, even though, the stock market and the federal government made it real difficult by cutting interest rates and the market crashed. And I'm going, no, it's not supposed to be this hard in retirement. I was just looking forward to collecting those mailbox checks, which I started out pretty good for the first 8 to 10 months. And then I had to take a 50% pay cut when Alan Greenspan, the Treasury Secretary, cut interest rates in half. And then the whole world fell apart a couple months later. So, I did a lot of community work, which is part of what I call my legacy. So the success is all about me as an individual. It's what I can accumulate and build for future generations. Legacy is what I can give back.
So you do
others.
A lot of philanthropic work?
I do. Gosh, since I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
I'm my mother's child. My mother was the same way, and so that's where I learned it from. So I've served on nonprofit boards since I was probably 23. It started out with a halfway house, Dallas Halfway House, obviously in Dallas. Today I'm on the board of Memorial Hermann Healthcare System, the largest healthcare system in Houston, a little over $6 billion in revenue. I'm on the advisory board for the dean of the business school at Purdue, Krannert School of Management. And that's my way of giving back to the program that helped me have access to all these opportunities. And so those are the two sort of serious commitments I have today. I've kind of pulled back a lot. I was a president of Houston Community College Foundation. I was on that board as well. The Boys and Girls Club of Houston, the YMCA of Greater Houston.
How have those helped you accumulate wealth, or have they not?
They've not.
They've not.
No, those are about giving back.
I understand.
But the one thing that it has helped me do, it helps me develop relationships. And, I won't say overwhelmingly that's panned out, but in some cases, those relationships have given me access to opportunities. I was part of the group that purchased the Astros in 2011. That came about through golf.
Okay.
But what really put me on the radar with Jim Crane was the community work that I had been doing that he was aware of and had seen. And that sort of, caught his eye. And then after the first year, he asked me to be on the board for the Astros Foundation, which I took over the golf tournament. Golf's a big part of my life. And in the first 2 years, we raised $600,000 when that tournament had been raising in a good year $40,000.
Oh, that's a significant difference.
It was a huge difference. But that came about when I was at his golf course in Florida one weekend, and I got a call from his general counsel, who I know, Monday morning, asking me if I would be interested in being an investor. And of course, the answer ultimately was absolutely. But that came about through relationships. So, I try to stress to college students, you can be the smartest person in the room, you can be courageous, you can be committed, but that's only going to take you so far. At some point, everybody in the room is just as smart, if not smarter than you. But what'll get you up to the higher levels, if you're competing with similar caliber folks, will be the relationships that you develop. Whether people can count on you, whether they can trust you, they know your work ethic, your character. Because in the trenches, when things get really bad, and they always do, they want to know if they can count on you, if you're going to show up every day. And showing up every day is 7 days a week. Some days 14, 16 hours. There have been times where I've worked around the clock, went home, showered, took a nap, and came right back because I do what I have to do.
And that was for your business?
No, that's when I worked for other companies as well. But my business, I probably worked harder in my business than I did for other people. Not because it was just my business, because the work needed to be done.
Right. And so what did that look like for you when you transitioned from being in corporate to being the biggest franchisee owner in Texas?
Well, the first revelation for me was I didn't know what I didn't know. Stuff that I took for granted, like health insurance.
Yeah.
I remember when I was first had put requests for proposals out there to get quotes for health insurance for my managers. And I picked a company. I said, hey, when are you going to send me the brochures with all the information? And the guy was looking at me like I was crazy. He had no idea what I was talking about. And he goes, no, he just gave me a rate sheet. It says if you're single, you pay this much. If you're single with kids, married with kids. And I'm like, no, the thing that explains all that. And he goes, no, you have to do that. And and literally the day before we were rolling it out, I was in the office till 3 in the morning typing up a package because I wanted to present a professional package to my managers because I was trying to raise their level of expectations and professionalism that I had experienced working for a big corporation. So I didn't have an HR manager. I had payroll and accounts payable. Somebody had to do it, so I did it.
Okay.
So that's a good example.
Okay. Okay. But when you left your job,
I didn't know what I didn't know. So
did you just leave and you told your family, like, look, this is what we're going to do?
No. I ran into, I won't say a hurdle, it was a brick wall.
Yeah.
At the company I was working for. I had been doing a lot of stuff in diversity. That was sort of my side job because I was in the consulting group. And I did such a good job. I mean, I exceeded everybody's expectations and knocked down a lot of myths around recruiting qualified minority candidates. And so like in 2 years, 25% of our new hires were African American and Hispanic. And they were lucky to get 1 or 2 people. So that 25% translated into 25 to 30 people.
Oh, wow.
Had never happened. And so all the big offices around the country took note and started calling the head of HR asking, what's going on. And Scott was kind enough and unselfish enough to say, it's not me, it's Shawn Taylor. And so he had me put together reports that he could send out to people in terms of what I was doing and the statistics.
And they like that.
Yeah, because they didn't know what to do. It's like, we can't find quality. We go to UT and, maybe one person would sign up and then that person kind of washed out in the interview process for one reason or another.
Right.
And so I convinced them recruiting wasn't the issue, retention was the issue. They just were sitting back being order takers. They're expecting folks who look like us to come rushing to their table to sign up. And what I convinced them of was, why would I come work for this office when I've had friends who I respected and who were either as smart or smarter couldn't be successful there? And there was a pattern of that. So why would I come work for you?
Right.
And so I went to the 4 universities that they recruited my white counterparts from, which was University of Texas, Texas A&M, SMU, and University of North Texas, because they were of the mindset that we have to go to historically black college, but they had a bias even towards that because they, in their mind, you couldn't get quality students that could handle the rigors of a public accounting firm. So the first thing I wanted to do was to blow that belief up by going to the schools that they attended and that they routinely recruit from. And so that's where all those candidates come from. And I just went to the source. So if we were looking for African American students, I went to the National Association of Black Accountants. If we were looking for Hispanic students, I went to the Hispanic Business Student Association. If we were looking for Asian, it was the Asian Business Student Association. And then I organized field trips to the office that the schools paid for.
Right.
And would drive them up, and we'd do a half-day tour, take them to lunch, and they were just begging to sign up. And so we started getting critical mass, and things were going really well, and I was loving it, because I was having a big impact.
Right.
It wasn't so much the impact on the firm, it was the impact on
People's
these
lives.
young students. I think I was in my early 30s then, so these are 21, 22, 23-year-olds, especially the master students. And so Scott had the idea of, hey, how would you like to do this for the entire United States? I said, man, I'd love it. I love doing this board and doing auditing and consulting and all that stuff. You write a report and you're gone.
Yeah.
And so he started floating the trial balloons up to the corporate office in Chicago. And I'm excited because this is like a no-brainer. And I go up to Chicago for some training, and the gentleman that recruited me off campus by then was a partner, and he pulled me to the side and asked me if I knew the guy who was doing it, which was a middle-aged white guy, nice guy. I met him a couple times and was very kind. And he said, well, so-and-so's been with the firm over 20 years, and he's a good soldier. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And my balloon popped immediately. So because this guy was well liked by some senior partner in this office in this particular city, they weren't going to move him, even though I had produced, which they've always talked about, results. And so that was the last time I was willing to run into a brick wall and get bloodied up.
So for people who, want to climb corporate ladder, or, they want the accolades and doing the things that you did, what would be either your recommendation or advice when, when they reach those brick walls? You know what I mean? Because sometimes it feels like, well, should I keep doing this? Do I keep pursuing? Do I keep hitting my head against the wall, or do I leave and start my own thing? And everyone isn't meant to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. Right. And so, but we still need leadership or people of color in those roles, to bring in other people, because if you didn't do it, they wouldn't have had those 25% increase of those people, or people attributing to the company.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody's cut out for corporate America either.
Right.
So I've always challenged authority. The other key point is you got to keep in mind this was my career started in the early 80s. So what's embraced today wasn't embraced then.
Right. But we still have a lot of the same challenges, though.
Yeah, but so let me give you some perspective.
Sure.
When I started with Arthur Andersen in 1982, the summer of 1982, there were no black partners in the big 8 firms, at least to my knowledge. And, we're talking massive companies. The first 2 black partners at Arthur Andersen were hired from the outside, from the IRS. And the reason they were hired, companies were now starting to become multinational, operating around the globe. And these were 2 tax partners who had expertise in international tax. So they had to go out and buy the skill set. Back then, if you didn't get recruited out of college and work your way up, they wouldn't hire you from the outside. But they had such a huge opportunity to make a ton of money. These 2 guys were brought in.
Right.
So the nut had not been cracked in terms of, or the code hadn't been broken in terms of being able to make that journey internally. And so today, it's a different story. A good friend of mine is with PwC, and he heads up the tax practice for the Americas. Roy Withers is his name. I think Roy's 51 now. And, runs the largest tax practice in the world. That wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't happen.
When I was coming through. So timing is everything.
Sure.
So if people in power aren't ready for it, I mean, you can try to make a run and try to break the ceiling. It just didn't work back then. And I was smart enough to say it's not worth it anymore for me. So I'm going to see if the marketplace values me more. And the marketplace valued me more, because it was all about capital there. And the irony of all this is that, 5 years after I started my Taco Bell business, Arthur Andersen got in a world of trouble because of Enron, and federal government shut Arthur Andersen down.
Yeah, so if you would have been there, it would have been shut down
It would have been shut down, even if I were a partner. I would have lost all my equity in the business.
Absolutely.
So, I always say not everybody that craps on you ultimately does you harm if you turn that crap into fertilizer.
Okay.
So it's just different. It just depends on the environment that you're in a company. And it also depends on, ultimately what you want to do. Some people want, automatic deposit twice a month. I was okay not having that. And I was willing to roll the dice because I didn't want to have to work till I was 60, 65, to accumulate the wealth that I needed to do the things that I ultimately really wanted to do. And that happened for me at 46.
Yeah, that's nice. So when you started off obviously with 1 Taco Bell, right? How many?
19.
You started out with 19.
Why you say it like you're surprised?
I mean,
you're just like everybody else.
Am I like everyone else?
Yes. Why didn't you start with 1? I already had a job. I didn't need another job. I was already making decent money.
So, but when you think about that, because a lot of people won't say, "Oh, let me start with 19 Taco Bells."
A lot of people won't start out saying they want to be a partner in a major firm. They won't start out saying they want to be CEO or CFO or chief operating officer or executive vice president. And this isn't a problem for minorities. This is a problem for everybody.
Yeah.
We just don't have the numbers like some other groups do. My life experience has taught me that most people think too small. And I tell people you have to dream bigger. And again, why not? I can tell you it takes as much work to do one Taco Bell as it did 19 in terms of getting the deal done. And it was more cost efficient to do 19 than it was to do one on a relative basis. What I was about, I wasn't about a paycheck. I wasn't about becoming rich. I wanted to become wealthy. And the difference is, if I'm rich, I'm making really good money, can do most things that I want to do, but I'm busting my butt, sometimes 7 days a week. And that's a treadmill that you cannot get off for a very long time. It's also a very inefficient way to try to accumulate wealth because 100% of what you make is taxed at the maximum tax rate. So you're going to be given, depending upon what state you live in, you're going to be giving up 40 or 50% of every dollar you bring in going to state, local, and federal governments. As opposed to accumulating wealth, which you can do in corporate America. You can do that through stock options, as an example, which a lot of people don't think about. But when I sold my company at the time, the tax that I paid on my gain was 15%, as opposed to ordinary income at 40 or 50%.
Right.
It's a little bit higher now, but I can tell you the difference between me paying capital gains rates and paying ordinary income. I wouldn't have been able to retire at 46 because it would have taken that much of my hard-earned wealth away. So, that's the difference. But people just don't think big enough.
Did you believe in rest when you?
Yeah. Sometimes I didn't have a choice. Sometimes my body would just shut down on me.
Yeah.
I just didn't have the energy to go. And I mean, some days, I would stay home for 2 days, 3 days, not a weekend either.
Yeah.
I'd wake up and go, I'm not going to work
I can't
today.
do it.
No, it's not that I can't do it. I listened. My body said, you need to rest.
Right.
So I rest. And then I would try to pace myself. But there were times, so there was a period of time where about 40 or 50% of the franchise community at Taco Bell was either on the verge of bankruptcy or actually bankrupt because of some really bad PR we had. And during that time, I was my sales were down as bad as 35% year over year. I had about $3 million of free cash in the bank. In other words, after I paid everything, I had $3 million left over. Within 8 months, that had shrunk to $400,000.
That's a...
Yeah. So, for about 2 months, I was like a deer in the headlights. I was just hoping things would get, and then I realized they're not going to get better. And so I wound up having to restructure all my debt, which was about $23 million at the time. And for about 16 months, all I did was work. I got rid of my partner, ultimately, which was, a tough thing to do. And once I got the restructure done, I, over 15 months, fired 40% of my managers because my partner was responsible for operations and things weren't going well. And so when I got into the details, which was a valuable lesson, I should have always been into the details, but I deferred. But when I got into the details, I didn't like what I saw. And I systematically, I know this is going to sound bad, I systematically went in and took managers out strategically.
Well, it's your business.
Yeah, but it's a tough thing to do because
Right.
people have families.
Yeah.
But the way I looked at it was, if you're not going to do your job, then you've made the decision you don't want to work here. And when I say I strategically took people out, I took people out that my good managers thought I would never touch. And so I made them an example, to be honest with you.
Wow.
So it's like firing a shot over the bow of a ship. Okay, it's a warning shot.
Yeah.
And so hopefully the rest of you will wake up. Unfortunately, a lot of them didn't, and so they wound up getting the boot as well. And then the company took off.
Yeah.
And 3 years later, I sold. So I was on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And then 3 years later.
Because you had to make hard decisions.
Yeah, you always had, just in life, you have to make hard decisions. You know, life is tough.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of good times, but has a lot of tough times as well.
And so when you were, how old were you when you were able to purchase a part of or invest in the Astros?
I don't remember my age. Whatever, 2011, that's what, 9 years, so my early 50s.
Okay.
I've since sold my interest back. It was a huge return on my investment. I did get my World Series ring, and forget you haters out there. Y'all will see this year. And I still stay involved with Jill. You know, every now and then we'll talk about, you know, working on some things together. You know, so I've even offered to whatever I can do to help, you know, get the organization through this crisis. You know, I'm willing to do that. So, but that was not so much a financial decision for me. That was an access decision, because there aren't very many minorities in general that are in ownership positions in any of the big three, especially then. And so that allowed me to rebrand myself from being a fast food franchisee to, you know, being extremely unique as an African American businessman. So it gave me a lot of access, and it still does, even though I'm not part of the ownership group anymore. And that's what I was looking for. So one of the things I'm doing now is, you know, I'm working relationships and angles to try to gain access to being on a corporate board, which is a paying position. You know, just to elevate my game and my stature, and to be able to contribute in a different way to companies.
Right.
So,
because some people would be like, "Oh, well, I'm good. You know, I've already reached a pinnacle. They're not going to keep," but that's what keeps you going.
No, not necessarily.
No?
I mean, I hate work. I've always hated work. Work for me is a means to an end. I work, for the most part, I can't put it in percentages, but it'd be pretty high. I work for the money, because the money ultimately allows me to do the things that are really important to myself, both from a personal standpoint as well as from a legacy standpoint. And I want your audience to hear this, because I've given speeches before and I would hear comments like, "Oh, you're just greedy." No, I said the money allows me to do the things that are important, both personally, which is family, generational, as well as legacy, which is community. So, you know, if I'm on a nonprofit board, for example, and there's an issue in the organization that if I was receiving a paycheck from a big company, and by me taking on this issue might compromise business for that big company, I don't have to worry about that right now. You know, I can be honest and I can be true to myself, and I can call BS if it's BS, because I'm not political. You know, and I don't have to worry about my paycheck, because I don't get a paycheck. I get direct deposit from my broker. So I don't have to worry about losing my job. So I can be true to me.
Yeah.
So that makes me, in my opinion, the best type of nonprofit board member, because I'm not worrying about the politics. I'm putting the institution first. And I've run into a couple of situations where that was really important, and it really protected the organization.
Sure.
Who shall be nameless.
Okay.
So,
makes sense. Do you have a large circle of friends?
No.
No, why not?
I know a lot of people, but I only have a handful of friends. Real relationships take a huge investment of time.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of time, you know, because I won't say I'm like really busy now, but I do stay busy. I'm working on a couple of ventures right now that I'm not looking at working full time, but trying to help them put together strategy, and educate the current owners and looking at their business different. And this one, hopefully I'll get done today, tomorrow at the latest. You know, I've got them moving from, you know, big paychecks, you know, rich, but you're really thinking about long-term value and wealth creation in their business. So they're, when we talk now, I don't even have to say anything. They're like, oh, we think we can do this, and we can get to this number in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
They still don't know how to do it, but they're thinking about the end game. And so how to do it is where I come in, and kind of advise them and almost like a mentor or an advisor, to challenge them, push them, and start holding them accountable so they don't get complacent.
Right.
So that's my new chapter. And I'm excited about it. And these are minority-owned companies. So I've kind of stumbled upon a niche. They're good businesses, bright people. They just don't have the business experience, and that's where I come in. I'm not trying to tell them how to do what they do.
Right.
I'm just trying to show them a better way to be able to scale up.
And so, well, 2 questions. One, do you think that is kind of like a byproduct of the work that you used to do? And also the other question is, how do you find these minority-owned businesses, or do they find you?
They found me. The one I'm working on right now, I've known this young man. He's 41 now. I've known him since he was 17.
Got it.
And when he bought this company 2 years ago, he blew my phone up. He tracked me down on the internet and blew my phone up. I was in the middle of selling a company that I needed to get out of. And I said, as soon as I'm done, I'll come by, because it's not that far from my house, their warehouse. I said, I'll come by as soon as I'm done with this. And after I got done with my transaction, I took like a month or two just to kind of recharge my batteries and regroup. And I went by and I spent probably an hour and a half with him and one of his managers, who's an integral part of the business. And by the end, I said, hey, are you guys interested in me getting involved? And they both said at the same time, yes. So I said, okay, well, give me a little time. I still need some time because I got some things to take care of. And I'll start looking at your numbers, your financials, and your corporate documents. And then I'll come back with a proposal in a couple of months. And so we did that in the fall, and we're trying to get all the documents done this week now.
Sure.
So I'm going to take an interest in the company.
Are most of those companies male dominated?
This one is male. Another company, they've got multiple partners, and they do have female partners.
So do you have, I know a lot of times you talk about your mom and her impact that she had on you. How does that, reflect in the work that you do now? Do you seek other organizations that are male-led?
No.
Female-led,
No.
I'm sorry.
No, it's just wherever the opportunity is.
Whatever opportunity is.
Yeah. So I've counseled and advised, female executives, up-and-coming managers, a couple of female-owned companies. When I say advise, I would take time, might be over a meal, breakfast or lunch or dinner, and I've spent considerable time kind of walking them through what they're trying to do, or even connecting them, whether it's a bank or a potential investor if I wasn't interested, or somebody that could give them access to help generate revenue for their business. So this happened to be 2 brothers that, they're not blood brothers, but brothers that own a firm.
Sure.
And they have a portfolio. And we were at breakfast, and they were telling me about one of the companies, and it's an industrial company. And I go, oh, well, I got a friend that works for a huge industrial company. He's in the C-suite. Send me some information, and I'll connect you with him. And my buddy responded immediately. He said, I'm going to put you in contact with the right people, and I'll stay in the loop. So hopefully they'll wind up getting a huge order. And this is a multinational conglomerate that's been around for over 100 years.
Oh, okay.
So this could be a game changer for them. So I'm going to see if they send me a check.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
But, when you say that, though, how important is it to look out for the people who look out for you?
I didn't do it. So, there's...
I know you didn't do it because of that, but I'm just saying.
If that, I won't ask for it, but if that's something that they would like to do or put me on as an advisor, I would consider it. I wouldn't say yes necessarily, but I would seriously consider it. Yeah.
But if someone were to do something, if you were in that situation and you were introduced to something that changed your life or your business, how would you, want to give back to those people that either introduced you, or how would that?
I don't know. We'll see what they come up with.
What they come up with? Yeah. And it
do
doesn't have to be necessarily them that I'm talking about. I'm just saying, a lot of times I feel like in business, or when, you're making these introductions, people don't remember that you did it, or they don't maintain that relationship with the person that made the introduction.
So the onus is on them.
Right.
And that will tell me a whole bunch, and whether or not I'll continue to do anything with them and for them.
And that's part of relationship building.
Right.
That's a big part of it.
Relationships. Yes. Otherwise, it's a transaction. I don't do transactions.
True story.
So. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've had people where it's been transactional, and I don't.
And then that's it.
I don't associate with them anymore. So, because they're takers. I don't like takers in my life.
Right.
I like for it to be mutually beneficial.
Right.
And so currency can be defined, and value can be defined in a lot of different ways. It's not just the exchange of money. It's time. It's, giving a hand up. It's doing something for somebody else. It doesn't necessarily have to come directly back to me, but, if I did this for you, then I expect you to do it for somebody else.
So I have a quick question before we have our final question, which is, I know you've worked with a lot of you've had business partners or people that you've built businesses with. When you're in the beginning stages of that, and you don't have access to millions of dollars, or you're building it from the ground up, how do you come up with one vision? Because if it's your vision and you say, hey, I want to do this with you, and you want to make sure it's both of you together, how does that happen?
I've never had to do that. The Taco Bell deal, I got plugged into that by an executive in the PepsiCo family. So Pepsi originally at the time owned Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and KFC. And their strategy was to start selling company-owned stores. And somebody that I knew actually plugged me in. We were originally talking about doing it together, and then he wound up pursuing another opportunity outside of Pepsi. It was a big opportunity for him, but by then I was already introduced and was working on the numbers to put together a bid for the restaurants here in Houston. So my partner, I needed somebody with restaurant experience, particularly in Taco Bell. So I was introduced to somebody who used to work for Taco Bell, and so it was more my vision than it was anybody else. She provided input and stuff like that along the way, but for the most part, it was my deal. My involvement with the Astros, I did a wire transfer.
And that
when he writing a check, it was a wire transfer. And
but for the Taco Bell, it was mostly your idea, but you had a business partner. Right. That's what I mean. Yeah. So them being on board is like they want to be a part of it.
Right. And so operations was what she was supposed to do.
Sure.
I provided some input. Came up with a framework for budgets. Relied on that individual to fine tune that, and then it was my job to work in unison to try to hold people accountable to
Sure.
it. With the Astros, if you know Jim, Jim runs the show.
Right.
I don't know much about baseball and how all that stuff works. I'm not an avid fan. I grew up playing baseball, but like I said, I didn't invest in it because I love baseball.
Right.
I invested in it because of other things that I wanted to do, and that gave me the vehicle to do that.
Okay.
And then my last franchise, a friend called me up who, is extremely wealthy individual, doesn't know anything about the restaurant business. So say, hey, you tell me how much you want to, of the company you want to own, let's do a deal, and you run it, and just, let's meet regularly, and you keep me updated.
And so for our final question, tell me, what does it mean to discover your best self?
I don't know, because I haven't found them.
No?
It's ever changing. It's like nature. I just had this conversation in a meeting before I came here. My sophomore year in college, before that I was like most people and resisted change. but the light went on one day. I remember I was going to the library. It was around exam time, and I was getting ready to leave for the library, and I heard this song by George Duke, and I had listened to this song a million times, but this one particular morning I heard the message, and the message was, change is the most natural thing in life.
Mm-hmm.
And it stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I was 19 or 20 then, and I've tried to live my life accepting change and embracing change, trying to get ahead of change. You know, if I could see it coming, I could be better. It's like, storm's coming. You know, there's certain things you'll do and prepare for. Well, you can smell the rain, or, now you look at TV.
Right.
And, we got a Cat 5 hurricane coming right at us. And so I've looked at nature, and nature is constantly changing every day. And so I try to be like a tree.
Yeah.
I try to have a strong trunk that's, properly rooted. But I try to have branches that, are thinned out enough so that when gale force winds come, it doesn't rip me off the ground and displace me. But I can bend and sway and kind of go with the current, and then, try to grow and reach for the sun for my energy and my nutrients. So I try to be as flexible as possible and not fight it.
Right.
I don't want to swim against the current.
Yeah.
If you've ever ridden a bike into a headwind, it is not
That's
fun.
tough.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. So I really try to look for, the pathway of least resistance, not shortcuts, because there are no shortcuts out there that always catch up with you. But I try to find a pathway to least resistance and ultimately get to an altitude, where I can catch the jet stream and I can just pin my wings back and just glide. Because there are going to be enough times where you got to flap and, it's like rush hour traffic.
Yeah.
I want to get to cruise control.
I don't want to hit turbulence.
Right. Well, the higher up you go, the less turbulence there is.
Yeah. That's what I want to do.
If you've ever flown on a private jet, no, I don't have one. But I've been on some friends. They fly like 40, 45,000, sometimes 50,000 feet. And it is like
smooth.
Silk. And so my analogy is I try to get to that altitude.
Right.
Got to dream big dreams.
I love it.
You got to have the courage, and you have to be committed, because whatever can go wrong will go wrong, and you have to constantly develop important relationships, authentic relationships in your life.
I would agree.
So,
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I hope your audience enjoys it.
I think they will.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Discover Your Best Self. Don't forget to subscribe and comment. Follow us on Instagram at Discover Your Best Self.